Have you ever wondered how a child, with nothing left but memories of pain, can stand on the biggest stage in the world and make millions cry with just his voice? How can someone who lost everything to nature's fury rise again, stronger than ever, and remind the world that hope can survive even in the deepest waters? This is not just a story of a boy who sang, it is the story of a survivor, a child whose life was swept away in a flood, yet who found a way to transform his pain into music that touched even Simon Cowell's guarded heart. The boy's name was Miguel, a 13-year-old from a small village in the Philippines. He was quiet, soft-spoken, yet carried an inner strength that no storm could ever destroy. Behind his shy eyes lived the weight of loss, but also the light of a dream. By his side was his grandmother, Lola Rosa, a woman who had raised him after his parents were taken by the flood. She was gentle, nurturing, and carried a faith that refused to be shaken even when everything around them was gone. Her wrinkled hands had held Miguel through sleepless nights of grief, whispering prayers when hope seemed too far away. And in the background of Miguel's journey stood Simon Cowell, the man whose sharp critiques had built legends but rarely softened into tears. No one could have expected that this boy from the ruins of a flood-stricken village would be the one to pierce Simon's heart in front of the world. This story is about Miguel's journey from drowning in despair to lifting the world with his song. It is about a flood that could have ended his life but instead gave birth to a voice so powerful that it silenced an entire stage. So, let me take you back to where it all began. A small hut, a night of heavy rains, and a boy whose life was about to be torn apart. Miguel was only 13, yet his eyes carried the weight of a lifetime. He lived in a tiny coastal village in the Philippines, where the sea was both friend and enemy. To his neighbors, he was the quiet boy who often sat by the shore, sketching shapes in the sand with a stick while humming tunes no one else knew. He rarely spoke, but when he sang, even the wind seemed to pause and listen. Life for Miguel had never been easy. His family was poor, surviving on what little his father earned as a fisherman, and what his mother could make selling vegetables at the market. Shoes were a luxury he rarely owned. Often he walked barefoot on the rough village paths, his feet hardened by years of dust and gravel. His school notebooks were filled not only with lessons but with doodles of musical notes, as if his heart could not contain the songs within him. Even before the flood, Miguel had known hunger. Some days, dinner was nothing more than rice with salt water, yet he never complained. He would smile shyly, saying he was full, while quietly leaving more food for his grandmother. Despite hardship, there was a gentleness in him, a softness that made him different from other boys his age. Music was his escape. At night, when the power went out and the world turned dark, Miguel would hum softly to himself, clutching the small rosary his grandmother gave him. Singing made him feel safe, as though his parents before the flood took them were still listening from somewhere above. Inside, Miguel wrestled with quiet grief. Losing his parents so suddenly had carved a wound too deep for words. He often avoided talking about them, but in the silence of his songs, their memory lived on. His voice carried both sorrow and hope, like the echo of a prayer whispered through tears. Miguel was not just a boy, he was a survivor. And though his life was built on loss, his heart still carried a dream to stand on a stage bigger than his village, to let the world hear the voice that had carried him through the storm. The night of the flood was the night Miguel's childhood ended, but certainly had started softly, as it often did in their village. But soon the skies opened with a fury he had never seen before. Rivers swelled, roads disappeared, and the sea rose like a monster from the dark. Miguel remembered clinging to his mother's hand, the water pulling at their legs as his father struggled to carry his grandmother to higher ground. In a single, cruel rush of water, everything was torn away. When the storm passed, silence followed, silence heavier than the roaring winds. Miguel was pulled from the wreckage by rescuers, but his parents were never found. That emptiness carved a hollow space inside him that nothing could fill. At 13, he had lost not just his home, but the two people who had been his world. His grandmother, Lola Rosa, became his only anchor. Yet even as she tried to comfort him, Miguel often felt alone. Nights were the hardest. He would lie awake in their small temporary shelter, listening to the distant crash of waves, haunted by memories of voices he would never hear again. Sometimes, he blamed himself, thinking maybe if he had held tighter, maybe if he had shouted louder, his parents might still be alive. The flood left scars beyond loss. Poverty deepened, their home was gone, their belongings washed away. Miguel had to stop school for a time, working odd chores in the village just to help Lola Rosa buy rice. Each time he saw other children laughing, carrying lunchboxes, wearing clean uniforms, a pang of envy and sadness tightened his chest. Yet the greatest conflict lived within him, the battle between grief and hope. Singing had always been his refuge, but now each note carried a shadow of pain. Could music still be a gift, or was it only a reminder of everything he had lost? Miguel's voice was his strength, but it was also his burden. Every song reminded him of love, loss, and loneliness. And deep inside, he wondered, was there truly a place in this world where his voice could matter? It was during one of those heavy evenings, when Miguel sat outside their small shelter, staring at the horizon, that the turning point quietly arrived. The sky was painted with the colors of dusk, Yet inside him, everything still felt gray. He had stopped singing for weeks, convinced that music was now a cruel reminder of what he had lost. His grandmother worried, but said nothing until one night, she placed a small battered radio in front of him. The radio was old, rescued from the flood's wreckage. Its sound cracked and hissed, but when Lola Rosa turned the dial, a familiar melody filled the air. It was a recording of a Filipino singer performing on a global stage, his voice echoing with strength and pride. Miguel froze. The singer was not rich, not famous before, but his voice carried him across oceans. In that moment, Miguel felt something stir inside him, the realization that maybe his voice, too, could carry him farther than the ruins of his village. That night, he sang again for the first time since the flood. His voice trembled, thick with grief, but as he sang, Lola Rosa's eyes glistened with tears. She whispered that his gift was not just for himself, it was for the world. Miguel realized that his pain did not have to silence him. It could give his songs the depth that others needed to hear. The twist came weeks later, when volunteers arrived in the village to help rebuild. Among them was a young woman with a camera, documenting stories of survival. She overheard Miguel singing while he carried water from the well. Captivated, she recorded him and uploaded the video online. Miguel thought nothing of it until one morning, strangers began showing up at their shelter, saying they had seen the boy with the voice of a broken angel. Messages poured in, offers to sponsor his education, invitations to sing, and then, the most unexpected of all, a chance to audition for America's Got Talent 2025. For Miguel, it felt impossible. How could a boy with no shoes, no home, no parents, stand on a stage halfway across the world? Yet, deep inside, something whispered that this was the moment his life had been waiting for. The invitation to audition for America's Got Talent felt like a miracle, but for Miguel it also felt like a burden too heavy to carry. He had never left his village, never seen airplanes, never stood before a crowd larger than his school assembly. The thought of singing on a stage broadcast to millions terrified him. Each night, as he lay awake beside his grandmother, questions flooded his heart. What if my voice breaks? What if they laugh at me? What if I fail? The days leading up to his journey were not easy. Money was scarce, and Miguel had to rely on the kindness of strangers who had seen his video. Donations trickled in, and with each peso, Miguel felt both gratitude and pressure. People believed in him, but he struggled to believe in himself. He practiced relentlessly, though. At dawn, he would sit on the hill overlooking the sea, singing into the wind as if sending his voice back to the parents he lost. At night, under the dim glow of a borrowed flashlight, he scribbled down lyrics and whispered melodies, trying to mold his pain into something beautiful. Each song carried fragments of his story: the rushing water, the silence after the storm, the ache of missing faces. But emotional growth came not just from singing, it came from facing the memories he had long tried to bury. Miguel slowly realized that his songs were not only about loss, they were about survival. He learned that grief could either chain him to sorrow or lift him into purpose. With every note, he began to forgive himself for surviving when others had not. His grandmother, watching from the side, reminded him gently that his voice was not just his own, it was a gift entrusted to him. For the first time since the flood, Miguel began to believe that maybe he was not cursed by loss but chosen to carry a story the world needed to hear. And so, with trembling hands and a fragile but determined heart, Miguel prepared to leave his small village, stepping into a future far bigger than he had ever imagined.